Hello and welcome to Down to Earth with Terry Virts, where we talk about what matters down here on planet Earth. Super excited today. We have Michael Steele on board. He is the former Lieutenant Governor of the state of Maryland and the former chairman of the Republican National Committee. He's currently working to improve voting in America as the chairman of the U.S. Vote Foundation. So Michael, welcome on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Terry, it's good to be on the podcast. Congratulations on the effort. And it's good to see you again. It's been a while, but it's good to see you, man.
It's been a couple years, I know. And I'm so intimidated. It looks like you're at church right now.
Just trying to keep you honest, baby. Just trying to keep you honest. That's right.
It wasn't me. I didn't do
it. Bless me, Father, right?
Exactly. So are you in Maryland right now?
I am in Maryland, in Prince George's County, here just outside of Washington, D.C. And it's where I was born at Andrews Air Force Base here in the county, raised in Washington. Right. So I'm a native Washingtonian. Moved back to the county when I got married many years ago and started a sort of nascent political career here in
pretty impressive political career.
Yeah, right. Just kind of fresh and new and different. But yeah, it just living large here in the county.
I spent a lot of my childhood in Prince George's County in Silver Spring, Lanham. We lived in Lanham for years, and I ended up going to high school in Columbia, but I'm from that area. Miss the crabs, miss the bay.
Hey, baby, I tell you, this is the season for the blue crab, and it's been great. And it's quintessential Maryland when you get down to you've got Old Bay seasoning all on your fingers and in your fingernails, and you've got a lump of crab meat in your hand. It's wonderful.
I am in Dubai doing some work with a friend of mine, and they actually had Old Bay crab cakes. They weren't as good as Maryland crab cakes,
of course not.
They got the seasoning over here.
No, I love Dubai, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful spot.
It's crazy.
It is. It's an amazing landscape, and the people are great. And good luck in the work there, man.
Yeah, the people are diverse. This is a place. You talk about diversity. I mean, this is true diversity. People from every country on Earth, and the art. It's like a science fiction city. It's really amazing, but having a good time. It's been busy. So you got interest. Your background, you went to Hopkins, Georgetown, one of these underachievers, but interested in politics. Why? I saw you were elected class president
I was my freshman class president, junior class president, and student body president at Hopkins. And I kind of got this run for office thing in my blood. It really, for me, it ties a lot into my overall approach has been geared towards service. I wanted to be a priest as a young man, ever since I was in third grade, really. And had pretty much sort of ordered my life such as a young person can order their life at the time. In that vein, along that path, and entered a monastery after I left Hopkins when I graduated college. And again, it was all about how can I be of service to those who need service, who need help. And vocation is a very, very personal journey, and it's one that is always, even for a priest who's been in for 50 years, it's still about discernment and understanding the evolution of your vocation and where God is ultimately calling you. And so for me, it was a question of how do I best serve out this vocation. And after 3 years, I felt the call to move on to something else and to put what I learned there, the experiences from that time in my life, to a greater work. And so it sort of manifests itself in public office, public service. And I brought that attitude to the job, whether as a politician, elected official, or as a political operative, as a party chairman. I still have this, how do you make this work for the betterment of people and for those who are engaged?
Right. That is so amazing. It's like, John Kennedy's quote, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Yeah.
That's not a question a lot of people are asking these days, I don't think.
No, it's not, because it's not it for more and more people. Unfortunately, it appears to be, country whenever, as opposed to country first.
Right.
And it just it is a manifestation of, I think, other pathologies that exist in our politics and that exist in our culture, that we have just stopped standing up against or pushing back on. We'd rather just give in to them. And so I think for a lot of Americans, a lot of the frustration that you hear and see is born out of this sense of disconnection. You look at the greatest generation, our grandparents and our parents, and we say, we look at men and women who understood what the call and the sacrifice was about. And while it wasn't perfect, Terry, it still, it launched 1,000 ships, that we benefited from. I mean, you were, part of an amazing space program as an astronaut because of what that generation sacrificed. Mm-hmm. So is that sense of, paying forward, foundational, groundbreaking kind of opportunities, self-sacrifice, a call to be there for the country. Mm-hmm. And today, that's, I think what January 6th reminds us is that some of our fellow Americans have lost sight of that. Mm-hmm. And they're projecting their own situations, outlooks, feelings, whatever, onto the country in a way that they lash out. And I think for all of us now, the test becomes, how do we change that paradigm? How do we remember, despite all of our shortcomings as a nation, we have 400 years worth of shortcomings we could talk about. But yeah. We also, for 400 years of great experimentation and great opportunity, right. and reconciliation that we've had to go through to get to some good things.
But you know what? America does that. We're not perfect. Yeah. We're not perfect. Slavery was our original sin. There's plenty of other sins that we've had, and our democracy lets us address them and fix them. And one of the things that really struck me, I was listening to a podcast about this East African kid that was trying to get a lottery visa to America. And I think he was Ethiopian, and the gangs were trying to kill him, and he was hiding in Kenya, and they're right. trying to kill him. And it was just, it's the most incredible story. And it struck me how many hundreds of thousands of people are literally giving everything just to come to this country. And then when you see people just trash it and talk bad about it, it's like, guys, let's make it better. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have an amazing country, and nobody's keeping you here. Like, if you don't like the country, you can leave.
Well, I've had this conversation, Terry, with a lot of folks, including some family members, right. where, my attitude is very straightforward. Okay, if you think it's better someplace else, go there. If right. you can't find someplace else better, then do what you can to make this better here. Right. And that's really kind of been the surviving narrative for this nation. When you think about how we were founded, on the grounds on which we were founded, you just realize that, yeah, this is the place that people come to be free. Right. They always have. And right. Even though that story has some really dark narratives, starting with our treatment of indigenous peoples, bringing slavery to these shores, et cetera, we still figure out how hold up freedom's light for others.
Right.
And in the course of all of that, those who do journey here push us to be better at being citizens, at being Americans, at being the nation that our documents promise that we can be. So
Right.
I agree with you. I think it's a hard, bitter pill at times, but there is so much still good, that despite everything else, when you look around the globe, if given the choice, folks would say, yeah, I'd rather take the risk there than anywhere else, and I think, I think America is still a bet worth making. So
Absolutely. I think we need to step up our game, because when you look at the world, one of the images that stuck in my brain probably most profoundly from space was seeing the Korean Peninsula. South Korea is this amazing, at nighttime, is this
yeah,
amazing, shining,
it's
incredible
beautiful,
economy.
right?
You look at China, there's a lot of lights on in China, and North Korea is a giant black hole with a little white dot where Pyongyang is. And the first time I flew F-16s there in the 90s. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, there's no ocean here. Where's the ocean? I had to get my map
Right.
out. I'm like, that's North Korea. And
It's like, where's I thought there should be land there. Where is it?
I don't remember an ocean there. And it hit me that what I was seeing from space was politics. And like, when a reasonably functioning free market economy, democracy, as opposed to evil communism. And so I came back from space thinking, and this division that we have, it's awful. And I want to talk a lot about that, but it kind of feels like it's the 20s, right? Like the 1920s, and 1940 is not that far away. And we need to make sure that 1940 doesn't happen. And it feels like globally there's authoritarian nations and people who don't share our visions and our values. And then, America needs to step up and kind of move in the right direction. I really feel that sense very strongly.
Well, I very much appreciate your perspective, and folks like yourself who've actually. I love the way you put it. What I was looking at was politics. When you look at the planet from space, and you begin to see how our politics shapes the course of not just a continent or region, but the globe. And you cannot escape the reality that despite all the BS that we throw up at each other and put out there on the streets, you can't get away from the reality. We all connected, baby. You just are. You just are. And we create these false narratives to distinguish ourselves and to project ourselves as better or less than authoritarian or fascist, democratic or communist, whatever. But at the end of the day, everybody, I don't care who it is just looking for a little patch of earth that they can call home, and they can raise their families. They can do them, whatever
Right.
they are,
Give their kids opportunity. Right.
yeah.
Right.
And they're not sitting there wasting their time trying to come up with political and economic schemes to better themselves over their neighbors. They're just, look,
Right.
here, I just need an opportunity. Give me the opportunity and I can make it work.
Right.
So you get to see that from space. I'm sure you really get to see the lights. The lights are very telling, not just about human progress, but about how our progress is oftentimes colored by our politics. And that, for me, is in recent years, has been a real big issue. It is in how our politics and our culture and all that culture encompasses. So, economy and all of that are in this battle, and one is consuming the other. I think the politics is pretty much consuming everything else because we've become tribal, we've become paranoid and schizophrenic about our neighbors, etc. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate your perspective.
They're not our neighbors. They're our enemies.
They're our enemies. Well put. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And it used to be, oh, he's a Democrat, he's a Republican, but now he's evil. He needs to be destroyed. So I want to talk to you about, like, a lot of folks seem to know that this is happening. There's some intuitive thing. I just having studied it a little bit, it seems to go back to the mid 90s when, maybe folks from the Republican Party might have learned a strategy to demonize the other side. And this division, and and I'm sure in your role, and you understand this better than I do, but when you look at these visualizations of Republicans, Democrats used to vote together and they used to live together, and it's just been doing this. What is causing this division? And have you seen The Social Dilemma? Because I think that has a lot to do with it. The movie.
I think that we're living in the social dilemma in consequence of that division, and it is self-perpetuating, it's self-fulfilling in many respects. It goes back probably. It's well beyond, the Trump presidency. It's well beyond the 2000 presidential election, Bush versus Gore. It really kind of begins to rear itself into the bloodstream in the 1980s, and there were. And I would even say you could go back a little bit further than that, probably to the 1964 presidential race with Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson, where you have this idea, this break with a historic past inside the GOP, where the party of civil rights and the party of freedom and individual dignity became moved as a result of political calculations, became more interested in garnering the support of segregationists and white male segregationists in the South, because that's only way you could win a presidential campaign back in the day. Remember, Republicans basically held down the North. Democrats owned the South.
Right.
And they had owned the South since before the Civil War. And presidential politics were such that in order to win as a Republican, you'd have to have some big galvanizing national story, right? That you were on the right side of, AKA slavery for Republicans in 1860, or you lost. It was very difficult to win, and so the party started seeing the trend lines and moved with those trend lines, but then sort of exacerbated them, urged them on a little bit as well. So it culminate in 1960 race, where you have Goldwater, making his declaration about freedom and I would say the illegitimacy of civil rights, and in the sense that the party began to move away from that, and then of course Nixon in his 1968 campaign really kind of put the political button on it, the presidential button with the Southern strategy, where they would make a wholesale appeal to white segregationist men to join the party and to vote Republican. We're now seeing the rotten fruit. The rotten fruits of that effort bearing itself out, a generation, 2 generations later. And it is
the Southern strategy. That was Nixon's.
That was Nixon's Southern strategy to win the presidency in 68, was to take advantage of Democrats leaning towards civil rights, Republicans leaning away from it, and the overall narrative of the country at the time to deal with these issues as best they could, a little bit more head on than they had in the past. Well, there were a significant number of Americans who didn't think we had a race problem. Does that sound familiar? There's a significant number
I
of
don't have a
Americans,
problem.
right,
Right.
right. A significant number of Americans who thought at the time that Martin Luther King was a danger to America. Does that sound familiar? Black Lives Matter.
Right.
So, playing to that narrow audience could get you immediate electoral success.
Right.
But the long-term detriment is what we're now having to deal with.
I think you just touched on it, is that, going back to those days, politicians figured out, hey, if I throw these firebombs, if I touch on these hot buttons, I can get elected. 94, things really got, and then in the 2000s, it's just been accelerated until 2016 happened, which is a natural, anyway, 2016 happened. And that ability to demonize and fragment gets you elected, and it damages the country. Hopefully it doesn't destroy the country. I don't think it will, but the things that we're doing are not good. They're
not good. And if you want to put a button on what we are seeing right now, it is the fulfillment of what Barry Goldwater postulated in 1964, when he said extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in pursuit of justice is no virtue.
Right.
Well, that's just bull.
Extremism. Sounds like a dog whistle. The dogs are coming.
It's a huge dog whistle. It's a huge dog whistle. And we're now living that out, where we've embraced extremism.
Say that quote again, please.
Extremism in defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in pursuit of justice is no virtue. So those who want to, who are not, in order to pursue justice, are trying to show you don't have to be violent, you don't have to be, pit one side against the other. And those who are, versus those who think that, a Marjorie Taylor Greene or a Matt Gaetz, Proud Boys, Josh Hurley, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, these guys who are pushing this extremism out there, that, because they're like, this, we're fighting for liberty. So therefore that allows us to do anything.
Right. It's a January 6th mantra. Right.
That turns the American narrative on its head. Some would say it actually exposes the truth of the American narrative, to some extent. But that's that moment from 64. You can see the arc of that, and you can see all of that now sort of landing squarely on America's plate in a way that we're having to confront it. We're having to deal with the extremism, and we're having to watch people who are trying to, fight for justice without resorting to violence, fight for justice without resorting to hate. Saying, well, I'm sorry, that's not a virtue. You're just weak.
Right. So I have a question for you. I was a math major, and we learned about this thing called a bell curve, right?
Yep.
And everything in life's a bell curve. The average height of people, the batting average of catchers, how many bananas you eat a year, whatever, like most things are in the middle, and there's a few outliers on the extreme right and the extreme left. And everything in nature usually comes in the form of a bell curve. Well, in politics, I've always believed that it's just like everything else. There's a bell curve. At least I want to believe this, and that most people are somewhere in the middle, and there's not that many people who are truly extreme right and left. And today, I don't know. We call that a bimodal distribution, where everybody's in the right or left. What do you think? Would politics gravitate towards a bell curve where most people are reasonably moderate? Or do you think we really are a nation of, you're either Republican or Democrat and you hate the other side?
We're not that. We're not a nation of Republican or Democrat and you hate the other side. We are a center-right, center-left nation. We are more likely to be much more center-right, or lean conservative on fiscal matters, and we'll be more center-left, lean liberal on some social issues. It's how
Right.
it's how you have tax cuts and gay marriage in the same year, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of Americans are okay with that. They're comfortable with that. Now, there are the consequences of those policies that we ultimately have to deal with, as we see with the tax cuts, where they don't benefit everybody. And then, even with, some of the social policies like gay marriage or now transgender issues, there's still social tensions around those that need to be resolved, irrespective of a court ruling or a piece of legislation. So it doesn't mean that there won't be ongoing battles in those spaces, but Americans are resolute to resolving them. All right. And they're resolute in the sense that they see, to your bell curve analogy, that that resolution is not on the outer edges, where it's an either or zero-sum game, but rather in that soft spot where a consensus has to be built, compromise has to be made, and leaders have to be able to pursue both of those in a way in which they bring the American people along. This is my
compromise.
Yeah.
You mean the way the House and the Senate, the way they work together to get bills done?
Yeah, exactly. And therein lies. You just made my point, Terry. You just made my point. So today, I think Americans need to understand we do not have men and women of virtue leading us. One.
Yes.
Therefore, two, they are not leaders. And so you wonder why we are in this quagmire. It's because the men and women we've elevated to represent our best interests, to represent our better selves, basically suck. And they need to be replaced. And at the end of the day, no matter how you cut this thing down, all the moaning and groaning and bitching by people about the state of our politics and the state of our country and the threat to democracy rests at our individual doorsteps. So if you think you did your civic duty in 2020 and you're done, then you have no idea what's about to hit you in 2022. And you damn sure have no clue what's coming in 2024. When you watch these men and women that we've elected look us in our face and say to us, I'm going to make it harder for you, Terry, to vote. I'm going to make it more difficult for you, Terry, to exercise your franchise given to you by the Constitution of the United States, because I have a greater political interest. And that political interest benefits me or my party and not you. And you know what, Terry? There ain't a damn thing you can do about it. That's what our elected officials are saying to us today.
All across the country.
So where I said, Terry, insert your name and understand what our elected officials are saying to you when they vote not to do a January 6th commission, when they promote a big lie that the guy in the other party actually won an election, he lost by 7 million votes. When they perpetuate these narratives, again, but I was just saying, extremism in the defense of liberty, when they use liberty as a shield to perpetuate their extremism, when they use the flag as a shield to perpetuate their extremism, that's what you need as a citizen to stand up and say, what the hell's your problem? No, we're not doing that. You're fired. You love Donald Trump so much, use his line that he made famous against those politicians out there. You fired one, now you need to fire the rest. And so I think that we need to be honest about that.
So I want to talk about the U.S. Vote Foundation and the structural improvements we can do, and gerrymandering and ranked choice voting and the popular vote, and there's all these things. But before we get there, I want to talk about you gave us the history, which is really interesting, the Southern strategy and Barry Goldwater, but there's some things today that I think people need to understand that cause us to be divided. If you watch cable news, whatever your persuasion, if you're watching Fox News, that you're getting fed a constant diet of stuff that will make you really mad and hate the other guys. If you're watching MSNBC or CNN, especially, you're fed a constant diet of stuff that'll get you really mad and hate the other guy. So the news that we get is really bad and destructive. It used to be everybody watched Walter Cronkite, and at least everybody had the same facts and the same information. That's not true anymore. But even worse than that, I think, much worse than that, is right here, social media.
Right.
The algorithms, and that's where I was talking about the social network. The computer that you have, whoever is watching this right now, is smarter than you, and it knows exactly how to generate an emotional response. And so whatever news and the little pop-ups that you get are going to force you into one camp or the other. They're going to take you to the extremes of the bell curve. And it feels like we've put in place, Twitter and Instagram and cable news and stuff. That is a giant hill to climb. Like we've put these things, we've developed these amazing technologies, and they're trying to destroy our democracy. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think you give the technology more power than it actually has. It's only, you can build the rocket and you can shoot up an unmanned rocket, but trust me, there's someone sitting at Cape Canaveral or some space base has got a button that can blow that thing up if it goes off the wrong way, redirect its course, get it to change its mission. So it's not an entity yet unto itself. So my point being is that all of these tools, whether it's technology, broadly speaking, specifically social platforms, cable television, whatever, we're still the animators of it. We're still the puppeteers that control that. That technology can splice down your information, your political, economic, social DNA, because I program it to do that. And so
they program it pretty well.
We program it damn well. So we are the authors of our own condition. We create the virus in the lab, if you will.
Yeah.
Right.
That's another topic we can get to.
That's another topic, right? I look at it like Frank. I made this analogy about Trump back in the middle of his term, because everyone's trying to figure out what the hell going on. I said basically what we have is Frankenstein's monster, in which this individual, this idea was created and set loose, and everyone thought that the people would reject it and rebel against it and be repelled by it. But instead, they've taken up their pitchforks and their torches, and instead of going after the monster, they're standing with the monster, and they're protecting the monster. And they're storming the castle, right? Not demanding you do something about the monster, but in defense of the monster. And so we now have to see ourselves when we're looking at all of these things, what Facebook refuses to do, what Twitter, Instagram, all of these platforms refuse to do under the banner of freedom of the press, is bull. You know why it's bull? Because the First Amendment only applies to government action, not private action, right? Facebook it's privately owned. It's not, the government doesn't run Facebook. Government doesn't run Twitter.
Right.
So it's as if Terry got up tomorrow morning and created a new social media platform, and a billion people jumped on it, right? And all this crazy stuff was happening on it. Okay, well, that's on you to manage that. The government has no say there. I can't claim you violated my First Amendment rights, Terry. No, sorry, private citizens can't do that, all right, to one another. Only that's about government. Remember, our Constitution regulates government action. All right.
Right.
So, we need to understand fundamentally what we're talking about, what applies to what we're talking about, and our responsibility in the thing we're talking about. So if we recognize, Terry, as you rightly put it, that these platforms and these programs and these operations, whether it is big tech, small tech, or whatever out there, is impacting social behavior, economic behavior, as we saw with Robinhood, political behavior, as we see with the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and the January 6th insurrection, then it's incumbent on us as citizens to decide what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable, and then change that, regulate it, fix it, put pressure on our elected officials to put in place a government guardrail, if you will. Right. There are commercials now that are aptly and correctly pointing out that we have not done anything in this tech space with respect to these social platforms in 25 years. Look how much technology's changed in the last 5 years, let alone the last 25 years.
Right.
So,
right.
We've not kept up with that. And how do we know that? How does it manifest itself? Watch what happens when members of Congress beat their breasts and act all big and bad and demand that the CEO of Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and MyTube and come before Congress, right? And then they can't even ask a decent follow-up question when the head of Facebook says something that's completely asinine, right? Because they don't even understand the industry. They have no idea, no matter what talking points their staffs put in front of them, they don't know.
They right. And unfortunately, I'm just going to be brutally honest, most of our government is led by people in their late 70s. And how are they going to manage this social network, which has a really dangerous effect on democracy? Because
of course it does.
Like you mentioned the word discernment earlier. People really need wisdom and discernment when they're watching their news. And when you watch CNN, you're like, all right, they're really anti-Trump, so I'll take this with a grain of salt. Or you have to put your wisdom and discernment cap on when you consume news. And your phone knows if you click this link, it'll send you more links like it. And if you click that again, you're going to keep on getting the same thing. And you need to actively try and get diversity of opinions, even if you don't agree with them. I read articles I don't agree with all the time, but I'll read them just to kind of understand that. And that's something that's some civic responsibility that we need, I think.
No, you're absolutely right. And we need more of it. But a lot of that, again, I'm not going to blame it on the technology for, its ability to send me, I find it annoying as hell that if I click on a pair of boxer shorts, for the next 3 days, I'm getting boxer shorts ads in everything I look at. But the reality of it is we get to control that. It doesn't have to be that way. It's because what people have figured out is, and this is again where we're okay with it because it's either cool or you don't think you have enough resource or bandwidth to push back, meaning there aren't other people who are as annoyed about this as you are. So there are a variety of reasons. And as long as there is that level of confusion, complacency, or just ignorance about how these systems work, people are going to continue to grift off of them. They're going to continue to promote them. They're going to continue to push them. And that takes us further down that technological rabbit hole where Congress at a certain point, there's not much of anything they can do because you're now so far integrated into everyday life to such a degree that how do you get it out of the bloodstream? How do you now regulate something that you were forewarned about 5, 7, 10 years ago, and now you are 10 years later trying to figure out what to do about it when it's too late? So we're not. I wouldn't say we're at that point yet, In some areas we are, but more broadly speaking, I think that there is still a lot of opportunity here for men and women. To your first point about the age of those who are actually looking at this, even if you are a septuagenarian who's the leader of the House or the Senate or whatever, put those who are tech savvy in charge. Let them figure it out. For just sit down and shut up in the corner and wait for them to come back to tell you what we need to do. I mean, there are ways in which we can engage in this now, as opposed to waiting until it's too late.
Right. So that is a very interesting question, and I want to talk about the state of the Republican Party too. But before we get there, I want to talk about, I think what you're doing, I'll let you tell us, at the U.S. Vote Foundation, ranked choice voting, the Popular Vote Coalition, gerrymandering, and what effects that has. I think the effect that has is Republican state legislatures, often, usually, sometimes Democrat, they'll make districts that are 90%. We'll use the Republicans as the bad guy in this example. It could be either party. The Republicans will go, this district is 90% Democrat, this is 90% Democrat, this is 90% Democrat, and then all the other ones are 55 or 60% Republican. So they'll get, 8 districts that they're probably going to win, and the Democrats will get 3 that they're for sure going to win. And that's the way I know. I lived in my district in Florida was like that. The 2nd congressional district in Texas is like that. And what that leads to is extremism, because in order to win your district, you have to be even more to the right or more to the left. And it's hard for a moderate candidate to win in the House, I think. Did I say that right?
No, you're right. So let's unpack it a little bit and put it in perspective. So first off, I'm chairman of the board of the U.S. Vote Foundation and the U.S. Overseas Vote Foundation. And our primary goal is to work with state election officials from, whether that's charged to the Secretary of State or other statewide election officials who have that responsibility. Sometimes it's the lieutenant governor, some in other states it's different. Certainly down to the county level, to the municipal level, where you're working with boards of elections, because that's where our elections are. Our Constitution laid out very specifically and very clearly that elections are not a federal matter. They are a state matter. So they decide, for example, how the president is elected. They decide how election days are run. They decide when election days are. Doesn't mean the federal government doesn't have a role, and that's going to be part of an ongoing debate that we're going to have at the national level under the Biden administration, and some of the efforts that they're trying to put forward with the John Lewis voting rights bill, et cetera. So you've got that. The other piece of this, when you get into, and I come from Maryland. Maryland is a 2-to-1 Democratic state. Democrats have been drawing the lines in the state in like forever, right? When I was state chairman in 2000, I sued then Governor Glendening for his map, because his map in Maryland, we have 3-member districts. So we have 3 representatives, state representatives, and a senator that represents a specific legislative district. That's how they hold on to the power, right? And as opposed to single-member districts where Terry has to run by himself, as opposed to running with me, Salam, and himself as a team against the Republicans, who have to find 2 other people to run with them. And we had partial victories on that to sort of break up this cabal of one party drawing the map.
Right.
The other piece, looking at historically, no one was concerned about redistricting for the 40 years that Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. From 1954 to 1994, Democrats effectively redrew the map in their congressional districts to hold the House of Representatives.
Right.
And everyone seemed to be okay. No one was complaining about redistricting the way we complain about it now. But time, place, consequences. That's circumstances. That's where we are today. Today is not 1954. Today is not
Right.
1994.
Right.
Newt Gingrich and a lot of Republicans came in and wanted to break that system up. And there were strategies that went into that, some good, some bad, some awful, that sort of contribute to today's current cycle.
Right.
So that's kind of the backdrop of where I come from in this space. I'm an avid supporter of the national popular vote, where you allow for the popular election of the president through the Electoral College. Ranked choice voting, I think, is it's a wonderful opportunity, again, to create a level playing field.
Describe that, please.
So ranked choice voting, we just saw that play out in the city of New York last week when they had their city elections for mayor and attorney, the U.S. attorney, et cetera, where instead of, and this was just in the Democratic primary, Republicans did not have this in their Democratic primary. What the voters were asked to do is rank your top 5 of all the candidates that are running, rank them in choice order, 1 to 5. And then what they do is, once all the votes are in, the bottom person who has the least amount of support is cut off. Then you look at who their second choice is, and those numbers are then added accordingly. And then you go through that round by round until you come to an eventual winner.
Until somebody gets 50%.
So someone gets 50%, right? And
in the first round, if you get 60 and I get 40, everybody else gets 40, you win right away.
You win right away, right. So what we had in the first round was Eric Adams, candidate for mayor, had something like, what was I going to say? 27%, almost 30% of the vote. The next closest person had 21 was 9 points off of his number. And so it is statistically more likely, given the way ranked choice voting works, that he's just going to add to that 30% and get to 51 eventually, because he's probably a lot of folks' second choice as well. So he'll get the benefit that way. So you've got ranked choice voting, final 5 voting, which is something that Catherine Gale has been promoting, and she and I are going to be doing a program on this coming up with the Renew Democracy Initiative, talking about this process where it basically eliminates the primary. I'm actually more inclined to that, because even as national chairman, I supported the idea of Republicans doing away with their primary. And what it does is it says that everybody in the pool, in the pool. So Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Green, everybody's in the pool. And the top 5 out of that pool go on to compete in the general election. And so those 5 candidates now are going to have to run in a statewide campaign or a local campaign very differently than they would otherwise. Why? Because tribalism won't work here, baby. If I'm a Republican, I need to pull off some center left votes. I need some Democrats to vote for me. If I'm a Democrat, I need to find some like-minded Republicans to support me, because otherwise I'm not going to win. So you defeat the tribalism, you push the candidates to actually have to run a campaign on issues and ideas. They have to listen to voters, which is what I love about the national popular vote, which at the presidential level would require candidates to run nationally, as opposed to into the 12 or 13 battleground states that they currently do.
And Florida, and
Correct.
So right now, as you said, California, New York are Democrat, Wyoming and lots of states are Republican. And Trump loses by 4 million and becomes president, which doesn't seem fair. He loses by 7 million and was close, right? He lost, but he was close. So, and there's a lot of reasons for the Electoral College, a lot of them bad, I think, and it's not 1789 anymore. So we could probably, but we're not going to do away with that. So if this National Popular Vote Coalition, states basically get together and they say, instead of whoever wins our state gets all the electoral votes, they say whoever wins the national vote gets all the electoral votes. And that's not going to come down to one vote like Florida. You're not going to have Florida again, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. So what the National Popular Vote does, it's a compact, very much like the lottery. States that enter into the Powerball compact, right? So states say, New York, Maine, Michigan, Delaware, New Jersey, let's say 10 states say, all right, we're going to play in Powerball, which means basically we agree that a winner in Maryland will get paid by proceeds from Michigan, right? Because a lot say, well, why would I put money into, paying someone from Maryland? Everyone agrees that, whoever wins who's ever in the pool for the Powerball game,
the
states, whichever states in the Powerball game agree that the winner from another state will get the proceeds. So that's the compact. Everyone agrees to who the winner is. Similarly, the National Popular Vote, states agree that the winner of the National Popular Vote will get the Electoral College votes of their state. So they enter into this compact. We now have 196, I believe it's 196 Electoral College votes in the compact. We're looking for 79 more states, or 74 more states, 74 more electoral votes, whatever the number is, to get to 270. And those states agree, once you get to 270, if you get there by July 14th or 15th, I believe, of the year of a presidential election, the compact is turned on. And that November, the winner of the popular vote will get the Electoral College state votes for those in the compact. And so what it does, Terry, is it forces candidates to now campaign differently. Let me give you the best example of what I'm talking about. So every presidential election, what happens at 8 p.m.? The news media is like, the news media is like to declare a winner, right? Oh, candidate X has won because, exit polling has shown, but it's still there's still 3 hours of voting on the West Coast. So if I'm in my car, and if I'm a Republican in my car and they've just announced that, Joe Biden has won or whatever, the presidency. So do I go home? Do I go home to dinner or do I go vote? Well, analysis has shown that roughly about 3 to 4 million voters go home. They just decide not to participate because the election's called. So
I'll take it one step farther. If you're in California, why vote anyway? The Democrat's going to win.
Well, and that's, and so what happens, so what happens, we know that a Joe Biden is going to win in California. We also know that a Donald Trump, Republican candidate, is going to win, let's just say for sake of argument today, in Texas, So what you see is the Democrats don't campaign in Texas, and the Republicans don't campaign in California. They'll go to California and Texas to get money and get out. That's it. But now, under National Popular Vote, what am I doing? I'm mining votes. Because I'm mining votes that will be added to a national total. So guess what? Those 4 million voters who go home, no, baby, you can't go home. I need you to go vote. Because those 4 million votes could make the difference between winning and losing for me in a national election when it's added to the national total. The second thing is it puts a cold towel on the East Coast from jumping the gun and declaring a winner, because you still have a mountain and Western time zones that still have voting going on. And so you cannot shut down the process any longer. You've got to play it out, because now as a Republican candidate, I'm going to spend time in blue states because I need to turn up my number of voters there to turn out. Yes, I'm not going to win California as a Republican candidate for president, all right? But guess what? I can get enough votes out of California that in a national popular setting, it will play well for me.
They're meaningful.
As a Democrat,
right.
I'm not gonna win the state of Texas as a presidential candidate. I'll put a little asterisk there. I think they have a greater chance in future elections, but let's, for the sake of this
2020,
argument,
in 2020, right?
In 2020.
Right.
So I'm not going to spend time there, but under national popular vote, guess where I'm going? I'm going to spend some time in Texas because I can mine votes out of the state that can be added towards my national popular vote total. And so it's about getting the number of votes I need to get 270 electoral votes that are in that compact.
So top 5 forces candidates for Congress or whatever to appeal to the other side and promotes moderates. Ranked choice voting, where you write down your top 5, allows also the same thing. It kind of, it gets more back towards that bell curve center that we were talking about. I think if you went hypothetically, let's go back to 1992, where you have H.W. Bush running against Bill Clinton. Oh, and there's this other guy, Ross Perot. Well, if that had been ranked choice voting, Bush plus Perot beat Clinton by 5 or 10 points. But when all 3 of them were there, Clinton won. So ranked choice voting probably would have flipped that election. Go to 2000, ranked choice voting, it was Bush, Gore, but also Ralph Nader. Al Gore probably would have won that election, right? So ranked choice voting actually might have had a real impact on elections that in our memory. This isn't like some theoretical thing, right? It's not. It actually might affect elections.
Right. And, when people look at the national popular vote, so you have a blue state that's in the compact and a Republican wins the national popular vote. And all of a sudden that blue state electoral votes are going to that Republican candidate. People like hair on fire. But the same is true the other way. I mean, look, that just means that blue state, that red candidate, put it in those terms, did a better job of making the case to blue state citizens or voters, period. I mean, it's
democracy.
It's democracy. They just made the better case. Right.
And everybody's vote counts. Okay. So you mentioned something, hypothetically, okay, let's say I like smaller government. I like, pro-business. I like people of color. I'm not, racist. I like our allies. I think Europe's important. I think Japan's important. I think we need to counter authoritarians in the world. I think the individual should have freedom and the government shouldn't get involved. Where do I go? Because that Republican Party is gone.
That Republican Party is largely gone. So where do you go? Well, I'll give your listeners a place.
We need third parties. That's what I'm going to.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to say I'll give your listeners a place where they can begin to go, and I want to make sure I get it right, so everybody is not steered the wrong way, because that can happen these days, which is crazy, but it can happen. So last week there was a national town hall that was held, and it was put together by Miles Taylor and Evan McMullin. Evan McMullin was a candidate for the presidency in 2016, ran as an independent Republican to sort of out of Utah to just kind of try to put the brakes on Trumpism back in the day. But they launched an initiative through what was called the Center-Right Alliance. They launched this program to give a new platform for voters like you described, who are looking to find a new home, if you will, so that they can begin to engage politically, and to participate, I think, more fully in the system and the political system. Our two parties right now are designed in such a way so as to not allow people to really jump in and be a part of the national effort, if you will. And so through various channels and means, people are trying to find a new way. So they launched an effort called Call for American Renewal, and it's the Renew America movement. And former Congressman Denver Riggleman calls it RAM, which I love. I love that.
Renew America movement. Okay.
Renew American movement. And it really is a place for center-right, center-left, independent-minded voters who are fed up with both parties, who are fed up with the sour politics that has really spoiled the fun of politics. Politics used to be fun. I've been in this game for 45 years. And it used to be fun for me, when I was 18, 19 years old, and involved in all of this, getting involved. And now it's just a drudgery, because as we were talking about before, the tribalism and the backstabbing and the grifting and all of those things that are going on. So this Renew America movement is something that people can actually look to participate in, and feel that they've got a home, if you will, to figure out where they want to go. And you can go to renewamericamovement.com and check it out and see for yourself. Now, will it lead to a third party? That's a different kind of work for people to understand. It is not, this system is not designed to allow for more than two parties.
Right.
And we've got to break that cycle. I've been an advocate for multi-parties probably for the last 25 years, because I've seen firsthand the rot within that something as established as the Democratic and Republican Party, and the Democratic Party is older than the Republican Party. But it's, that over time, they can become full of themselves. They do not feel any connection, the need for any real connection to voters, and purpose,
like you talked about.
And so we're now ripe for, look, we're not a parliamentary system, so you just can't have parties just springing up as you do in some European capitals. But we can methodically put together a movement that allows for options for voters. It's costly. It's time consuming to do. It is, there are many bars, because again, as I started our conversation on talking about voting, our electoral system is not run at the federal level, it's run at the state level. So you're basically, for a new party to emerge, you're basically talking about 57 separate electoral systems or state parties. That means the 50 states and the 7 territories that are allowed to participate in our voting process. So you've got a lot that you've got to churn through, Terry, in order to get it done, but you can get it done. And Renew America movement is the newest effort, and probably one of the boldest, because we're going to be backing and supporting candidates, supporting the Liz Cheneys and the Adam Kinzingers, if you will, who are currently serving, who are standing with the American people and democracy, and looking for challengers against those more Trumpified candidates, incumbents out there, extreme,
it's funny you talk about when politics was fun. I stuffed envelopes in 1984 when I was in high school for the presidential election. But the Republican Party hasn't won a general election but one time since the 80s. 2004 is the only popular vote that has not gone Democrat since HW's first election. So, and the brand that they're going in, that demographic is not growing, right? And so unless they make a giant course correction, they're going to be irrelevant.
Well, they don't
they'll
need
have
to
a
make
third
a
of the House
giant.
forever.
Well, you don't need to make a giant course correction if I can change the rules of engagement. And that's what we're seeing happening at a state legislative levels right now. So if I say where you used to have in a county 100 ballot drop boxes, and I narrow it down to 1,
right?
Or if I have in a county where you had the ability to do souls to the polls on Sundays,
Right.
on the Sundays leading up to the election, and certainly the Sunday before the election, but you've now outlawed that.
Right.
Or you have in a given county where I had precincts that were fairly distributed throughout the county so that everyone
Right.
could access them. And now you limit the number such that my grandmother has to catch 2 buses to go vote.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't need to worry about, the rules when I can just change the process.
That's terrifying what you're saying, and it's true. I live in Texas, and I was in the Air Force for 30 years. No, I do know. I was in the Air Force for 30 years, and I did absentee ballot voting. I was a Dade County, Florida military absentee ballot voter. I told President Bush that in the Oval Office one day. And so absentee ballot voting is just normal. I did it for 30 years, and I figured it was COVID. We should be able to do that. And I filled out my absentee ballot request, and I wrote, I don't want to get COVID. And the lady called me, actually, the election office called and said, that's not a valid reason. You had to be in jail or in a hospital or overseas or something. It was like not wanting to get COVID was not a reason. So Texas is clearly very, very restrictive. And they decided to only have 1 drop-off thing per county. And I'll tell you what, Harris County, Houston is bigger than it's bigger than 2/3 of our states, probably.
It's huge.
Some of those counties are physically the size of Maryland. And so
but that's
restricting voting is not the way you're going to win national elections.
Most
people see that.
You fix the game when you can't win.
Right.
You fix the game when you can't, when you give up on having credible candidates and messengers, when you give up on having a credible message. We are a party right now in the Republican Party that cannot tell you what we believe because we don't have a platform.
What you believe is Democrats are evil. That's what they believe.
Oh yeah. We believe all Democrats are evil, and we need to, quote, take them out, period. So if that's the language we use to describe our political opponents and our stated mission.
Right.
And the only thing we believe in, according to some, is Donald Trump. And I stand in full-throated opposition. People ask me, well, why are you still a Republican? And my response is very simple, because I know it pisses them off. The easiest thing to do is leave. They want you out. They want guys like me out because they don't want to be reminded how wrong they are. And so
that is funny. It's
true. But it's true. It's true. Yeah. So
I love that. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat.
You're smart.
But I'm in the middle on most things. But anyway, well, I'm passionate about it, though. And normally we'll be talking about space topics and technology and exploration.
So can we talk about space for a second? Look, I'm not going to come on a podcast with an astronaut and not talk some space, baby.
What's your favorite space memory? Was it growing up? Was it recently? Did you ever go see the space shuttle launch?
Unfortunately, I never could. I never could get there to see it.
Yeah.
But whenever the space shuttle took off, I made a point to be glued to my TV set. So I've seen the highs and the lows and the heartbreak of that. I grew up at the dawn of the space age. As a kid in the 1960s, I took to heart what President Kennedy said about what we could do. I'm a huge fan of NASA, to be rather honest about it, and very concerned and worried about turning over our space programs to private industry, to billionaires. I think that's something that should remain. If I were president, NASA would never have to worry about a dime. Everything serious business, because it is not only our future in terms of space exploration and the things we want to do on the moon and Mars and elsewhere throughout our galaxy and beyond, but it is also the bedrock for innovation and discovery and technology. And I'm not a big government guy, but I think the government has a specific role in this space that, yes, private industry can play and can be invited in, but not control, and not dominate, and damn sure not determine. Because when the profit motive becomes the bottom line, that's a problem. And that's my soapbox on space. Guys like you, men, I mean, you, dude, to do what you did, just to first off get in a damn fighter jet and go Mach 7 or whatever, but then to put yourself on top of this fuel-infested tank and get shot into and get shot into space, dude, that's a level of bravery that we don't teach our kids to appreciate what that means. And my concern is that when you got these folks out here saying, here, spend $250,000 and get shot into space. Yeah. To me, that just, I have a problem with it. I think we're opening up Pandora's box here that it's not Kennedy's dream. It's not what the president, I think, envisioned what our space exploration should be, but I'm old school, so I readily admit that.
Sometimes the older ways are best, to quote James Bond, I think. When I flew on, my first flight was on Endeavour, on Space Shuttle Endeavour, and they said, this mission's $1 billion. And you get into space and you have payload bays, and they open up to let the payload out. And I noticed that when we open up the payload bay, $1 billion bills didn't go floating out into space. That $1 billion was spent in Florida and in Texas and at Goddard Center and at Space Flight Center in Maryland. And of all the money the government spends, and it's a lot, it's too much, the NASA money has a pretty good return on investment. I'll definitely agree with that. It's tech,
it absolutely does.
Engineers, and Hopkins is, a lot of Hopkins grads.
Alma mater, that's right, my alma mater. And we played an important role in space exploration, as have a number of our universities here in the state, as well as around the country. Yeah. So, I really think that if we married or remarried engineering and math, space, through various STEM programs, et cetera, so that we could generate the next generation of very talented, gifted individuals like yourself who are going to take us beyond what we're doing right now. That to me is, to your point, is how those federal dollars and state dollars see the return on that investment. And I just think we need to be careful and smart about that. We see the Chinese now playing in space. We see other great nations beginning to go there. I don't think we need to, call me selfish in some respects, call me a homeboy because it's America. I don't think we should cede that ground that easily to commercialism and those that can throw around $1 billion because we don't want to spend $1 billion. So I just think there's so much there. I spend a lot of time on the Science Channel and National Geographic, and following your colleagues, former colleagues in this space. I got my telescope in the morning room over there. I go out at night and look at the stars. And so for me, this is something that it is unique the way we've always done it. It is concerning the way it seems we're about to do it. So
I'll tell you, China is very much going in that direction. They have done some amazing things. They landed a probe on Mars,
Yeah.
just like we did this year. They landed a probe on the far side of the moon. They just started to build their space station, so they're very active in space. And they're 20 years behind us, but they used to be 100 years behind us, and now they're 20 years behind us. And that
Well, and look again,
sure.
the government doesn't have a whole lot of people jawboning about where they're going to put those Chinese yen, right?
They don't complain.
They don't complain.
Or
So
they can complain once in China, and that's about it.
Right. So the government's like, we're putting, $500 billion into space. Okay, guess what we're going to do? And so you're right. In 5 years, they'll be 20 years ahead of us. So we've got to be mindful of that, because it is the new frontier. As we're reminded by Star Trek and Kennedy and the space program of the 1960s, which I think still has a very relevant narrative to sell to the American people. If only, again, getting back to our politicians, if only elected officials believed in it. But
Well, that's a great place to end. I'm a big fan of that, but I appreciate talking about the politics because, as I say, sometimes it's not about the rocket science, it's about the political science. Because unless you get the politics right, you don't get the rocket science right.
You don't at all. No.
The roads don't work, the police don't work, the schools don't work. Unless you get the politics right, it's really important. And
it's not and the thing is, Terry, it's not zero sum. So for folks out there sitting, what programs would you cut? No, it's about priorities. It's about how you set the priorities. And so we can, in any given budget cycle, say for this cycle, we're going to prioritize bridges and roads and infrastructure. Maybe NASA's a little bit part of that, not as big as it otherwise would be. Okay, fine. But then other budget cycles, we prioritize differently. Say, you know what? We're at a point now where we got certain things done. We can now begin to prioritize on these things. So we want to put a little bit more into our space education programs at the high school and graduate and college level and graduate levels. We want to certainly put more into Goddard and NASA and Kennedy space flight, et cetera, so that we can, at all times, whether it is a priority this year or a priority next year, at all times we're still in the game. We're still able to play. So.
Right. It's all. I'll end on this perspective. So a friend of mine, another Hopkins grad and University of Maryland grad, Mike Griffin, was the NASA administrator when you were. So when you read his resume, I just feel like I haven't accomplished anything in life. One of the smartest human beings on planet. And he was distraught because this public survey had just come out. How much do you think the military gets? How much do you think welfare gets? How much do you think NASA gets? And the average American thought NASA got like between 20 and 25% of the federal budget. And the real answer is about 0.5%.
Yeah.
NASA gets billions of dollars. It's a lot of money, but it's 0.5%. That actually now it's probably 0.2% or given
it's gone down.
I haven't looked at it recently. We're spending so much money, but anyway, the point is NASA gets a lot of money. It's well funded, but it's in the big scheme of things, it's not that much. So, but anyway, with that,
thank you for your service, my friend. It was an honor the first time I met you. The honor remains the same and as strong now that we're back together again. I wish you the best in what you're doing, because it's nice and good to have your voice out there to talk about big societal issues and issues in policy, but also to be a go-to on the stuff I love, like space. So
we call me whenever you want. You got people call me in the middle of the night. Hey, Terry, how do you go to the bathroom in space or whatever? I'm like, it's Friday night at 8, they're at a party and he's got a bet. So he calls his astronaut friend to ask me these questions. I'll give another shout out, Renew America Movement.
Yes.
So folks should check that out.
Absolutely. Check it out. RenewAmericaMovement.com.
US Vote Foundation.
USVoteFoundation.org. Go check it out. And there you can get all the data information you need about voting in your jurisdiction. And some of the big issues that we're tackling right now, both here and abroad. As you mentioned, you were, an Air Force guy who, had to vote abroad. And we started originally as the US Vote U.S. Vote Abroad Foundation, and to work with the men and women who are stationed overseas, as well as expats who are working and living abroad, but still U.S. citizens who wanted to participate in democracy. And in fact, our organization wrote the current federal law governing overseas voting. And the government reached out to us back in the 1990s, late 80s and 90s to address this issue. So we've been on this front line, standing with our men and women in uniform who are serving our country to protect democracy and defend our right to vote, but who themselves oftentimes find themselves the victim of circumstance and bad policy, not able to exercise that right. So we've been working to fix that. We've fixed it in many ways, so that whether you were on a base in the Middle East or in your basement in Kentucky or wherever you happened to be at the time, you could still exercise and access the franchise.
I appreciate that. It's the foundation of our nation, and it's not, I can say it's hard to do sometimes overseas. So
yeah,
they need some help to just make things easier, because getting through the government bureaucracy is never an easy thing. So well, anyway, Michael Steele, thank you so much for coming on board, and I hope to do this in person at one of your events or something. This would be great. So thank you so much for joining Down to Earth with Terry Virts.
Thank you very much, Terry. It's a real pleasure, buddy.